a woman disappears into the mountains and remains missing for 4 months. Then, one day, police follow strange clues to a large, forgotten hollow in a tree. Inside is not just a body, but evidence that the killer has been concealing a murder for months. One day, police notice something unusual in the backyard. The soil in the middle is stained red, as if it had been soaked with blood. When they dig it up, they find 3 bodies, a woman and her 2 children. Based on the evidence at the scene, the police deduce that the killer is the woman's husband, Haber, a doctor with considerable reputation in the town. He has been missing for almost 8 hours since the crime occurred. Officer Andie sees Haber's car on a forest road. The car door is open, and his phone and wallet are still there. Only he is missing. The area near the forest has steep slopes, so a single misstep could send someone tumbling down the hillside to their death. Not long ago, a woman named Jean also disappeared near this forest. To this day, there is still no trace of her. Owen is the person who knows the forest best. Under his guidance, the police conducted a search. But even as the sun was about to set, they had not obtained any information. The vast forest makes it easy to get lost. Therefore, the search team had to temporarily withdraw and hand over the nighttime search to the Air Force Police using old infrared equipment. When Andie arrived home, she immediately checked on her horses. Her family was waiting for her for dinner. Since Helen's ex-husband was imprisoned for domestic violence, she and her daughter Kira and Andie had moved to this town. Their lives had been peaceful, but then the unsettling silence disrupted them. Andie couldn't sleep well all night. Every time she closed her eyes, she dreamed of the forest where Haber disappeared and a white stray dog she had never met. A sudden gunshot jolted all 3 awake. Andie quickly drew her gun and ran outside to investigate. A deer lay on the small road in the distance. A car with its headlights on sped towards them, honking and taunting Andie. The sheriff was very familiar with the owner of the car. It was the Mason brothers, notorious poachers who lived at the end of the street. Their hobby was skinning deer. They often tortured animals in the name of hunting. While the two were talking, a police officer led in a mentally unstable man named Damian. He worked at a fishing tackle shop on the small street. For some particular reason, the locals always ostracized him. Local thugs even regularly stuffed dirty things into Damian's mailbox to tease and harass him. Damian pleaded with Andie to go to the downstream area of the 2 rivers to search for him. The reason was that after seeing the news about Haber, he kept having hallucinations. He believed Haber was definitely there. Andie, being a materialist, didn't pay much attention to Damian's words, but she still followed the sign to the end of the road. The Mason brothers' farm was full of animal skins and deer antlers, as if they were showing off their trophies. The evidence of their poaching was very well hidden. The entire farm only had 1 sheep. The 2 of them said that the animal skins and the pile of deer antlers in the corner were stolen from stray dogs. Sheriff Sam was about to retire, so the people were preparing a farewell party for him. Andie would take full charge of Haber's case. She had reviewed old files. A year ago, a resident named Michael, who often drove his Volvo, broke down on the side of the road and then disappeared without a trace. 4 months ago, a man named Crane also disappeared while climbing a mountain. Now Haber had disappeared, and they still hadn't found any trace of him. In this mysterious land, disappearances seemed to have become commonplace. Damian went to see Andie again. This time, he brought 2 paintings depicting the confluence of rivers. That was a scene he frequently saw in his hallucinations. Bells echoed around. Something nearby was connected to the black horse. In addition, Damian had drawn a bizarre image that looked like a gaping mouth. It could be a tomb or a cave. Andie took the 2 drawings to Sam for help. It was then that she learned Damian was the person Sam had been tracking for 5 years. Years ago, Damian was the local head teacher. His student, Luke, suddenly disappeared. Damian claimed he saw Luke in a hallucination. Luke's face was covered by something. He was placed in a deep pit like a mine shaft. Beside him was the creaking sound of an old windmill. A month later, the police actually found Luke in an old mine shaft with no ventilation. His eyes were blindfolded. Right next to him was the windmill creaking in the wind. Only the killer knew that secret detail. So everyone believed that Damian deliberately boasted to the police about his murders. But because there was no physical evidence or DNA, the prosecutor didn't press charges. The case was closed. Helen found a new job on a farm outside of town. The owner, Rose, ran an art studio and was looking for a talented artist. This job seemed tailor-made for Helen. The 2 hit it off immediately. An argument erupted from the backyard, interrupting their conversation. Rose, armed with a gun, chased away a man who was shouting. It was Rose's niece Sophie's ex-boyfriend, a violent man who had harassed her many times. Despite witnessing such an awkward scene, Helen decided to take the job. Back home, she told Andie what had happened. But Andie was now engrossed in the missing person case. She hadn't slept or rested for days. She was doing everything she could to find information about Haber and why he had acted so brutally towards her family. After days of relentless investigation, the case finally made progress. Someone reported to the police that they had been attacked by an an unidentified creature the previous night. Fortunately, no one was injured, only their food was stolen. The incident occurred near the area where Haber disappeared. Andie suspected the two incidents were related. After the police searched the area, they indeed found a pair of leather shoes. The two immediately split up to investigate. As Andie moved forward, she heard gunshots. She called the police repeatedly, but received no response. Turning back, she discovered he had been attacked. A woman had snatched a police officer's gun and accidentally pulled the trigger, revealing their position. Andie raised her gun and advanced deeper into the forest. The attacker was Haber, the man the police had been searching for. He had always been hiding in the woods, his body covered in scratches from tree branches. He refused to admit to the murder and wouldn't elaborate on the story. He only left a cryptic message that the matter was not over yet. Before Andie could stop him, she witnessed him pull the trigger. Seeing the suspect die with her own eyes deeply traumatized Andie. She walked along a forest path to relax. Unconsciously, she came to the confluence of two rivers. The scenery before her was exactly like Damian's paintings. The sounds echoing in the valley were indeed like the ringing of bells. A sign not far away indicated that this place was called the Black Horse Trail. Going deeper, she saw a hollow in a tree with many gaping holes. Inside the hollow lay the body of a woman. The details Damian described had nothing to do with Haber, but they helped the police find the murder of Jean, a 66-year-old woman who had disappeared 4 months earlier while mountain climbing. The murder weapon was a 35mm hunting knife. The serrated tip, broken off at the end, was still lodged in the victim's collarbone. Sam became even more convinced that Damian was behind the mysterious disappearances. Otherwise, how could he have accurately predicted the hiding place? Andie suspected the same, but since Jean's case was reopened, there has been no evidence linking Damian to it. Moreover, if he really was the culprit, why did he repeatedly put himself in the police's line of sight? Andie received a crime report. Brian's wife, Claire, had gone horseback riding with her sister 4 days ago. Today, only the horses returned, and Claire had mysteriously disappeared. Before she disappeared, Owen found her jacket in the log cabin in the woods. This was the jacket she had bought the day before she disappeared at Damian's fishing tackle shop. When the police questioned Claire's sister, she said they hadn't been in contact for weeks and knew nothing about the horseback riding. Even more suspicious was that the fishing tackle shop was closed on the day Claire disappeared. She also didn't go to work and had ample time to commit the crime. The police held a press conference to announce the search and rescue. Brian and his daughter Maddie were invited to attend. Andie planned to use the log cabin in the woods where Claire's coat was found as the center of her search. The area was rugged. The search team was divided into groups of 3 to scout on foot. Each group was given a GPS device. The remaining police officers would receive information at the command center. Damian was also assigned to the search team. Andie did this for her own reasons. Damian had accurately predicted the hiding place of the bodies in 2 previous cases. Claire had also bought coats from his shop. This proved they had some prior contact. If Andie could get Damian to reveal more details only the killer would know, she could confirm his guilt. But when Damian entered the log cabin, he couldn't use his psychic abilities. He wandered around the room for half an hour without sensing any clues. The police found a footprint in the bathroom near the log cabin. After measuring, it turned out to be a men's shoe size 45. At this point, Owen gave Andie a new clue. On the day Claire disappeared, a man from outside the town came to rent a horse at the stable, but he was the only one who returned. There was a stranger's phone in the saddle. Owen's family had lived near the forest for generations, so he knew the area very well. Andie asked him about the routes Claire might have taken. At this moment, Owen's aunt came out of the house and immediately recognized Andie as a local from the town. She recounted an ancient legend from the forest about an old woman with a wicked and evil appearance who often lured people away from the stable. Owen's aunt also reminded Andie that if she didn't understand her roots, she wouldn't understand herself either. Andie didn't pay attention to this advice. She had someone check the phone. The man's name was David, a retired judge. His phone was full of evidence of their affair. This clue confirms that Claire lied about going horseback riding with her sister, but was actually secretly dating someone. The case then reached a dead end. Andie, already under immense pressure, received news from the hospital that her mother, who was in a nursing home, was suffering from increasingly severe dementia. Her mother was so delirious that she almost didn't recognize Andie. The next day, Andie received a new crime report and rushed to the scene. While she was away, Helen was cleaning out old belongings and found a picture of a boy. Memories buried for 15 years immediately resurfaced. This time, the person reporting the crime was Damian. He was watching TV at home when the window suddenly shattered. A gasoline bottle was thrown, causing a massive fire. His mobile home was completely destroyed. But by the time the police arrived, Damian had vanished without a trace. That same day, Rose was preparing to go shopping in the city. Because of the long journey, she didn't return until late at night. On her way home, she encountered a tree tree branch blocking her path. As she stepped out of the car to clean up, a dark figure suddenly attacked her from behind. When she regained consciousness, she found herself in the trunk of a strange car. She tried to kick open the trunk to escape, but unfortunately, she slipped and fell down the mountainside. Helen couldn't contact Rose, so she tracked her down. Finally, Helen rescued her. Andie received the news and went to inquire about the situation. Surprisingly, she discovered that Damian was also hiding there. He feared the arsonist would strike again, so he had to ask Rose for shelter. Rose guessed that the arsonist was only trying to intimidate her because she had a close relationship with Damian. He had taken care of her a few years ago. She believed he had special abilities. He couldn't be the one responsible for the series of horrific crimes. The search for Claire continued. Andie also joined in. She left the group of 3 to search alone. She quickly moved beyond the range of radio communication. The deeper she went, the more frightened she became. Branches were bent into the shape of a human. Eating utensils were tied up. There was even a whole roasted suckling pig. Unconsciously, Andie had wandered deep into the forest and beyond the search area. Given the situation, she couldn't escape if it got dark. She was forced to set up camp and sleep there overnight. She ate canned food by the campfire. The howling of wild animals echoed from the darkness. She shone her flashlight around but found nothing unusual. In fear and anxiety, she clutched her gun tightly and held her breath in the tent all night. As dawn approached, she saw a white dog. When she returned to town, she checked the photos she had taken the night before. Suddenly, she discovered a picture of herself sleeping. Sam wasn't surprised. Only one person could do something like that. It was Jack, a former soldier. After being discharged from the army, he had been hiding in the forest. He often wore camouflage and wandered around, but he was just a madman. He'd never harmed anyone. Andie returned to the forest during the day and followed the same path as before. Along the way, she discovered animal traps set by Jack. Was he hunting people who had wandered into the forest? Jack's camp was right in front of her. The fire had just gone out, indicating he'd left not long ago. The same howling sound Andie had heard the night before came from the radio. Inside the metal crate, she found a hunting knife. The backpack on the ground belonged to David, who had gone missing with Claire. Jack aimed his sniper rifle at Andie, but the trees obscured his view, causing him to lose sight of her. Jack cautiously stepped forward to check. Unexpectedly, Andie was waiting for him nearby. Elsewhere, Helen couldn't find Rose. Sophie said she saw Rose carrying a gun into the storage shed. Helen rushed over and found Rose digging a chest under the floor of the shed. It was full of cash. Enraged at having her secret discovered, Rose chased Helen out of the shed with her gun. Andie took Jack to the police station for questioning. She claimed that the missing person's belongings found in the camp were something she had picked up in the woods. She also claimed the audio recording of the monster's howl was something she had recorded in the woods. She then gave it to a friend who worked as a zoologist in the city to examine using specialized equipment. The conclusion was that the sound could not have been made by a human or any animal. Jack suspected someone had set traps deep in the woods, but Andie believed this was just his excuse to escape punishment. She relentlessly pressured him to confess. Unable to withstand the pressure, he suffered an epileptic seizure and was rushed to the hospital. They were forced to stop the interrogation. Police confirmed that the dagger found in Jean's fog was a hunting knife, matching the type sold at Damian's fishing tackle shop years ago. Andie went to Damian's burned-out mobile home to look for more clues. She found a group of thugs loitering around the area. A neighbor said that on the night of the fire, he had seen them carrying gasoline. Just as Andie was about to arrest them all, Kira stepped forward and took all the blame. Since moving to this small town, she had no friends. She could never quite adjust. At Sam's retirement party, Kira coincidentally met Ben, Owen's son. He always hung out with a group of delinquent youths. Because Kira's mother was a police officer, they proposed a challenge to test her courage before agreeing to let her join. The challenge was whether she would dare to set fire to Damian's mobile home. Sam visited Andie, bringing with him the fish he had just caught. He asked about how Andie and Helen met. Years ago, Andie lived in the city with her parents. After her father's death, her mother became an alcoholic. Andie took her to an alcohol rehabilitation group. There, Andie met Helen, who also needed help. Helen lived with her daughter, Kira. Later, Andie joined them. The 3 of them lived together. Tired of the hustle and bustle of the city, they and Kira returned to Andie's hometown to live. After a brief conversation, Sam sternly stated that Kira's actions constituted a crime. Even Andie, who loved Kira the most, couldn't protect her. Sam had established a community program allowing juvenile offenders to work on local farms for 2 hours a day for 3 months. Although the work was quite hard, involving cleaning filthy pig pens, Ben volunteered to help Kira because he couldn't bear to see her suffer. Rose explained that pointing the gun at Helen that day was just an accident. The money in the box was for emergency savings. Because she hadn't declared it as income, she panicked. The 2 reconciled. Karen also promised not to reveal this to Andie. Andie informed Rose that the police had found the car she had abandoned on the side of the road after the attack. Jack's DNA was found on it. The police suspected he had blocked the road with a tree branch for personal gain. This was a case of random crime. Andie was determined to go to the hospital to question Jack directly and also to visit her mother, but she witnessed Jack escaping without even changing his clothes. If Jack returned to the forest, it would be even harder to catch him. Andie remembered Owen and asked him for help in tracking down Jack. Just as they were about to leave, Andie discovered a knife in Owen's log cabin. The knife's tip was broken off. At this point, the clues were piling up. Andie immediately arrested Owen. The knife perfectly matched the broken tip found in Jean's collarbone, but Owen said he had never seen the knife. Forensic analysis showed that the fingerprints didn't match Owen's nor Jack's. At that moment, Ben proactively approached Andie and admitted that the knife was his. A few days earlier, while using a metal detector to search for gold by the riverbank, he had accidentally unearthed the knife. Jean had a habit of climbing mountains towards the summit. Therefore, Andie speculated that the initial crime scene was the mountaintop. After committing the crime, the killer threw the knife away, and it accidentally fell into the river. Owen had a rule that no knives or scissors were allowed in the house, so Ben hid the knife in the small wooden house. Unexpectedly, this caused a misunderstanding. After many days of searching, the rescue team still couldn't find any trace of Claire. The police decided to end the investigation and officially announced Claire's death. This was a heavy blow to the victim's family. Maddie's incessant crying was like a thorn piercing Andie's heart. The killer was like a ghost lurking in the shadows. The police were always passive. Andie constantly thought about solving the case, but she couldn't do anything. She used alcohol to numb herself. In her drunken state, she saw the white dog again. What did its appearance ultimately mean? Sam passed by the fishing shop and saw Damian walking with a boy. He immediately became alert and secretly followed them. Damian led the boy further and further away to a campsite 3 kilometers away. An old acquaintance approached Sam, causing him to momentarily lose focus. Damian was preparing to leave with the boy. Fearing trouble, Sam followed Damian's car to near the farm. Andie arrived to investigate. Knowing the boy had learning disabilities, Damian taught him math through games. He didn't care about what others thought because he truly loved the child. The boy's biological father was a playboy who did nothing worthwhile. Without Damian's help, it was unlikely anyone else would lend a helping hand. Rose's farm held a harvest end event. Helen was moved by the lively atmosphere. She stayed and lost track of time. Even she, who had abstained from alcohol for many years, drank. In her drunken state, Helen stared blankly at Sophie's protruding, pregnant belly. Sophie's eyes stared back at Helen as if questioning something. Helen suddenly burst into tears. Memories buried for 15 years flooded back. The photo was of her eldest son, who had once suffered from asthma. 15 years ago, Helen rushed to bring her paintings to the exhibition. In her haste, she forgot her asthma inhaler. She could only watch as her son suffered an attack and died in the car. She never spoke about it, but the guilt never faded. Someone reported gunshots coming from a cabin in the woods. Andie had planned a family outing, but she abruptly canceled. She and a police officer in a bulletproof vest quietly approached the cabin. The shooter was Maddie. The pain of losing her mother was unbearable. She hid in the house where Claire's jacket had been found. Maddie, drunk, fired a few shots to vent her anger. Maddie confessed that the gun was taken from the Mason brothers. Andie intended to use illegal possession as a charge against them. Unexpectedly, besides the guns in the cupboard, she also found a box of modified hunting knives, and the trash can behind the house emitted a foul odor. When they opened it, it was a whole crate full of something disgusting. She immediately called for help to arrest the two of them, but after checking, the police announced that it was venison. All of the Mason brothers' guns were registered. Maddie's gun wasn't theirs. The hunting knife was also legal. After investigation, the two men's statements completely matched. The gun was actually something Maddie had secretly taken from her father, Brian. This became a laughingstock. Andie went to the bar to drink. Everyone in the bar mocked her. Sam still stepped in to help her get out of the awkward situation. That night, Rachel, a regular at the bar, was returning home. A speeding car, without hesitation, took her life. The next morning, the police received a report that a breeding cow at Brian's farm had been butchered during the night. This cruel and perverse act certainly wasn't the work of a wild animal. Similar cases had occurred in the town before. Some said the killer was an alien. Others rumored it was some kind of cult ritual. All sorts of bizarre speculations. Andie was racking her brain over the case when Damian came to see her. He brought a drawing and declared Claire dead. A drawing kept appearing in his mind. He even smelled the rotting corpse. The drawing in the drawing perfectly matched the symbols on the carcass. Although Sam and Andie were still skeptical of Damian, it was highly unlikely he could have killed so many cows alone in such a short time. To test Damian's abilities, Andie gave him a watch, claiming it belonged to Claire. She asked him to sense it. He felt a deep maternal love emanating from the watch, an intense, suffocating sadness. In reality, the watch belonged to Helen. The feelings Damian described perfectly perfectly matched her personality and mood. Could Damian really possess supernatural senses? During a night patrol, Andie spotted Kira standing by the roadside. She got out to investigate. A thick fog enveloped the area. There was no one else around. The familiar white dog reappeared ahead. Andie quickly drove away. Damian, worried, went to the police station and said he sensed Claire at the foot of the mountain near the old lumber mill. Now the area was a vast, inaccessible forest. Andie went alone to investigate but couldn't find Claire. She only discovered an abandoned car. She tried to call for help but there was no signal. Deep in the unfamiliar forest, she quickly got lost. The night fell, making the forest even more eerie. Occasionally, the strange sounds of some creature echoed, causing her horse to panic and run away. In the chase, she accidentally crashed into a car. It turned out the police couldn't contact Andie, so they asked Owen to go to the mountain to find her. At that moment, Andie was running frantically through the forest. Owen braked too late, causing the accident. Andie recalled the howling sounds she'd heard. They clearly didn't sound like human noises. Her perception began to crumble. She started to suspect that an unidentified creature might actually exist in the forest. She even thought of the white dog that often appeared. Owen said that native white dogs were kind-hearted and that their presence near people was usually for protection. After the initial panic, Andie scolded Damian for deliberately giving her false information, causing her to lose her horse and almost die. Her insulting remark finally made him realize she was even worse than the townspeople. On the surface, she pretended to trust him, but in reality, she only wanted information from him. When he was no longer useful, she was ready to discard him. Andie led the police back to the mountain. The car, hidden by branches, showed signs of a collision. The front of the car still had traces of blood. The police apprehended two men about 3 kilometers from where the car was found. They were planting prohibited plants in the area. They also had a recording of a voice recording used to scare away anyone who approached. The two men confessed that they were merely hired by a mysterious individual who had never shown their face, bringing supplies and payment to a fixed location every few weeks. The person was scheduled to return to collect the supplies in a few days. Ambushing them near the area would reveal the identity of this mysterious individual. That night, Andie had rare time to spend with Helen, but while cleaning Kira's backpack, she discovered a box of condoms. Kira was forced to admit she was in love with Ben. Helen's overly protective nature angered her, and she scolded her daughter. The two argued fiercely, neither willing to back down. Andie disagreed with this parenting style, but Helen refused to accept her advice. Since Andie took on the missing person investigation, she had practically lived at the police station. She had little time left to care for her family. She postponed countless family gatherings. Someone who couldn't even care for her own family was now standing above others, criticizing how they raised their children. Helen, of course, couldn't accept that, so the two of them had a cold war all night. Helen still refused to talk. She even planned to move to Rose's farm for a while. Before Andie could even resolve the family crisis, another disappearance occurred. A few days earlier, Rachel had said she wanted to go to a bar. After that, her father hadn't seen her since. Rachel worked part-time at the ski resort. She usually spent money lavishly. She even booked the entire bar. Her room was full of cash. How could she have so much money with just a part-time job? Andie found an earring that had fallen along Rachel's usual route, and pieces of wreckage from a car crash matched the car abandoned on Mount Mitchell. The police confirmed the earring belonged to Rachel. The man who planted the forbidden plants was a man with a thick beard. The car abandoned in Mitchell Mountain was registered in his name, but a few weeks earlier, he had reported it stolen. As for the matter in the plantation, it was under the jurisdiction of the state police, so Andie had no right to question or arrest them. Sam feared that Andie's excessive persistence in pursuing the investigation would break her down. He took her to the riverbank to relax. In truth, Sam also had a troubled life. 40 years ago, he and his first love had a child together, but on the day of birth, the child mysteriously disappeared. Because of this, his lover suffered from mental illness. Unable to bear the torment, she passed away from grief. Since then, there has been an unfillable void in his heart. After she left, it was already midnight. Her door had been broken down, and a bloody pig's head lay on the dining table. Kira had just returned home, terrified. Andie stayed by her side, never leaving her side. At that time, Helen was at Rose's farm. She had forgotten her earlier resolve to quit drinking, and was downing glass after glass. In a moment of uncontrolled rage, she and Rose had sex. Sam rushed to confront Damian, asking if he was responsible for the pig's head. Sam's obsession with Damian had reached a frenzied level. No matter what happened in town, he always suspected Damian first. But he was retired and no longer had the authority to enforce the law. His trespassing and assault led to his temporary detention. Remembering Sam's past help, Andie bailed him out. Upon returning home, Andie didn't realize someone was hiding. Completely unprepared, she was knocked unconscious. The kidnapper was the bearded man she had been questioned earlier. He tied her up in a storage room, acting professionally, indicating she wasn't his first victim. The real mastermind behind it all was the one manipulating everything. It was Dominic. Andie recognized him because he used to frequent the police station. The first murder case she investigated was the kidnapping of Dominic's son. Therefore, he harbored deep resentment. He was unsure how to get revenge when Andie arrived. The land where the forbidden plants were grown actually belonged to Dominic. Just as he was about to strike, Sam arrived in time to prevent the tragedy. But during the struggle, Sam felt his heart give out and collapsed. Just as Dominic was about to attack Sam, Andie managed to escape from Richelli and save the situation. Sam was taken to the hospital for treatment. Due to his advanced age, his body couldn't withstand prolonged exertion. He was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. He didn't care about the harm his body would suffer from the constant danger, but he knew exactly what shady things they were up to. For example, David. David wasn't as innocent as he appeared. Many people wanted to kill him, but Dominic refused to reveal the underlying reason. Police investigated David's assets and discovered a shell company under his name. A large, unexplained sum of money was being transferred into the company every month. Andie and her team went to David's house and found his wife attempting to destroy evidence in a document she hadn't yet burned. The document listed the directors of the shell company. Two names were familiar to Andie: Michael, who had disappeared a year earlier, and Jean, who had been found 4 months after her disappearance. The cases were interconnected. All the missing people were linked. Jean, Michael, and David were all shareholders in the shell company. Claire, though not on the list of directors, was David's mistress. In total, there were 4 directors, the last one being Mark, the head of obstetrics at a hospital. After his death, the position was taken over by a doctor who had previously gone missing. That person later became the new head of obstetrics. But what ultimately connected all these people? The police chief asked Andie to convey his regards to Sam and also revealed a secret he had kept for years. In fact, after Sam retired, the position of police chief already had another candidate. It was Sam who repeatedly pleaded with the chief before Andie was considered. Considering his many contributions to the police department and Andie's serious dedication, the chief finally agreed. After midnight, Helen tried to avoid Rose in every way possible. She decided to resign to sever their relationship, but Rose believed Helen would regret it for the rest of her life if she continued to live with Andie. Because Andie couldn't understand Helen's artistic inclinations, the only thing they had in common was family, a life too boring and monotonous. Helen decided to return to her family. The three of them rarely had a simple dinner together. Suddenly, the white dog reappeared. This time, Andie wasn't afraid anymore. She brought out some vegetables from the house to feed the dog. Then, she discovered an artwork by Helen in her storage room. The character in the painting, Rose, was naked. Her police instincts, combined with her quick wit, immediately made Andie realize something was amiss. Betrayed by the man she loved, she was devastated. Perhaps this relationship was over. Her love was broken, but her career took a breakthrough. The police discovered Brian had been involved in financial transactions with a shell company. Although he vehemently denied it, the police found a safe in his house. Inside were a gun, countless gold and jewels, and Brian and his wife's passports. Andie checked the 2 passports and discovered that Maddie's passport was fake, and even Maddie's birth certificate was counterfeit. Brian's secret could no longer be hidden. In fact, many years ago, he had been diagnosed with infertility. Neither he nor Claire met the strict local requirements for adoption. To fulfill her dream of a perfect family, Claire met David. After spending a large sum of money, David handed them a child stolen from the hospital. That child is now Maddie. The truth was revealed. David, Claire, the doctor, Jean, and Michael were all part of the same group. For decades, their criminal network had destroyed countless families that should have been happy. The group's crimes could be traced back to the Tevantes, the 70s. Andie investigated the company's records and discovered a familiar name on the transaction list: her mother. She checked her birth certificate. The person who processed the records was Mark, the director of the shell company. There were no birth records for Andie at the hospital. The birth certificate was fake. Anxiety grew. Andie wanted to find her mother to confirm. Surprisingly, despite her lucidity and delirium, Andie's mother still remembered a few things. Andie wasn't her biological child. She and Claire had stolen the baby from the hospital to raise. No one knew Andie's true identity. She only knew that her biological mother was also a local resident of the town. Sam reminded Andie that Rachel, the missing woman, had been pregnant 15 years earlier. She gave birth at the hospital where the doctor worked, but was informed that the baby couldn't be saved due to her weak health. Police reviewed hospital security footage and discovered that Rachel had visited the doctor's office a few months prior. Afterward, $30,000 had been transferred into his account. They suspected Rachel might also have been a victim. Later, it was discovered that the doctor's actions were exactly like a blackmail scheme. Additionally, traces of Claire and David were found at gas stations and convenience stores in nearby towns. Combining multiple clues suggests that Claire may have deliberately staged her disappearance to escape fearing exposure. The forensic examination of the car at my Cell Mountain finally yielded results. DNA traces of the Mason brothers were found in the vehicle. Furthermore, several knives matching the type used to kill Jean had been found in their shed, making them prime suspects. However, the car belonged to the bearded man, and the hunting knife had been purchased elsewhere by the two brothers. Without direct evidence to convict them, the police could only release them. Helen and Kira moved to Rose's farm. Until her relationship with Andie was resolved, this was their only refuge. She asked Damian to predict her next steps, but he sternly told her to leave quickly. In the middle of the night, Helen was awakened by crying. It was Sophie. 2 days earlier she had given birth, but Rose, the midwife, said the baby wouldn't survive. Sophie couldn't accept the truth and didn't want to bother anyone, so she sought solace in her grief while everyone was asleep. She told Helen that Rose wasn't her biological aunt. 7 months earlier, she had fled the city to escape her ex-boyfriend and coincidentally met Rose, who had told her that Rose's studio was a suitable place for her to rest during her pregnancy. Rose had also taken very good care of her, and their relationship grew closer. At the same time, Andie found an old newspaper from a local resident containing an article about the founding of Rose's art studio. Her founding partner was none other than Max. The next morning, Helen was about to ask Sophie about it when she overheard the Mason brothers arguing with Rose. Helen clearly heard one sentence. Why did Rose insist on killing Rachel? Helen was so frightened that she immediately packed her things, intending to flee, but the Mason brothers had already subdued Kira. After her secret was revealed, Rose no longer pretended. She ordered the Mason brothers to take the two men to the cabin in the woods to deal with them. Upon receiving the news, Andie immediately went to the Mason brothers' farm. Following the drag marks underground, she found Rachel's body stuffed in a plastic container. The police arrived to provide backup. Based on the trail, they immediately went to the log cabin in the woods and successfully rescued Helen and Kira from the Mason brothers. The last remaining person was Rose, but the art studio was empty. It turned out she had been taken to the cliff behind the mountain by Sam. Andie followed to hear everything firsthand. Rose was the biggest leader of the entire gang. She had directed the Mason brothers to murder Jean and David. The two had planned to withdraw from the group and bury the secret at the bottom of the wine well. The cattle at Brian's farm were also Rose's doing, intended to silence him. The person who ran over Rose that night was Sam, the man with the deepest hatred for her. Because the child he had with his first love had been kidnapped by Rose's group decades ago, he relentlessly investigated the child's identity. Finally, he found the answer. It was Andie. That's also why Sam always showed up at the right time whenever Andie needed help. Although it wasn't his fault, he was still willing to shoulder the responsibility of being a father he'd missed for 40 years. The case isn't over yet because Claire and David are still on the run. The culprit from 5 years ago remains unknown. Perhaps that mystery will be solved in part 2. The film ends here. Thank you for watching. Goodbye and see you again.